Thank you very much, Udo, for the kind introduction. Also, thank you, Graham, for inviting me. And well, thank you all for attending this workshop. I didn't expect such large numbers, but I guess no one really did. So I'm amazed of how many are attending right now. All right, so my talk is probably going to be a little bit different from what you've heard so far. I'm not going to focus on how we can improve algorithms. Instead, I'm going to talk about how we can inform the public about what algorithms are doing, and that we, by showing a few examples. What I'm mainly focused on is the Scikit project. So I would like to take this opportunity to introduce the Scikit project. The Scikit project is an ongoing Horizon 2020 funded capacity building project with the aim of building a research center in Cyprus, which is called the Center for Algorithmic Transparency. And in this talk, I'm going to first talk a little bit about the context of what the Scikit project is focusing on. Then I'm going to briefly introduce the Scikit team and the main mission, and then talk about different aspects of our activities that we have been working on the past 2.5 years by now. So let me start with this slide here. So of course, we all have heard a lot now about the need for algorithmic transparency, and the we looked at examples of how we can avoid it, or how we can improve transparency. But what probably has been missing a little bit has been to take on the more societal lens to see that actually what is the impact that information access systems can have. And for this, I would like to use this paper here, which was written by Noel Carroll in 2014, a little bit as a motivation. So I extracted these two quotes from this paper. So Noel said, search has assumed a position of central importance in the way that people access and use online information services every day. And further, he also says, by shaping both what people know and how people know it, search engines and their organizations are able to wield an immense amount of social power. So this social power is exactly something that we are probably all aware of, especially as kind of computer science researchers are focusing on information retrieval, but we probably don't think too much about it. We are focusing more on, okay, how can we fix the things, but we maybe have to talk about also how we inform the public about it, how can we illustrate what are the impacts. And how much the impact is, I wanted to show with this slide here. So this probably doesn't come as a surprise to any one of us. So if you look at what is the search engine market share worldwide right now, we see there Google with 92.05% on top. So then long time happens, there's eventually being Yahoo still mentioned here, Baidu, Yandex, and DuckDuckGo. So we clearly see Google plays a very important role here. And the reason why this is probably we can all agree, is that because Google is very easy to use and they provide very good results. And having this in mind, it might be worth looking at what actually Google's mission. And when you go to the About page, just took the screenshot here, it says that Google wants to, so they see the mission as follows. Our mission is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. So just emphasize the word universally there, which seems to suggest that they want to provide access to everyone. So make information accessible and useful for everyone. So if we now go to Google and do a basic image search, I just took a screenshot here when I searched for Glasgow, you get probably exactly what you were expecting to get. So you see here some pictures of George Square, you see Ashton Lane, University Campus, you see the exhibition center, so the main tourist sites that you can expect probably when you search for Glasgow. So the interesting, what is happening now, if you use a different language, like Korean, for example, you see the pictures are slightly different. In this case, you will still see something very similar. You can still see the exhibition center here. You can see the city hall. You can see city center. So you'll probably see still some tourist sites. Let's take another example. This is, I've been told, says Glasgow in Chinese. Now you probably see, well, the focus of the images has shifted a little bit. So now you see much more prominently the beautiful University of Glasgow campus in there in the top results. So, and of course, you as IR researchers, you probably know what's happening here. So the reason for this probably is that the documents that have been indexed about Glasgow in Chinese are probably much more about the university, because that's what maybe Chinese people are more interested in when it's related to Glasgow, and that's why you get these results. But let's look at a few other examples. So if you search, for example, for nurses, this is the results that you get here. And you, of course, you would probably expect, living in reality, that there are far more female nurses than male nurses. But studies have shown actually that the results that you get here, they are far less extreme than what it is in reality. Similarly, if you search for surgeon, you will get also far more male-dominated pictures in here, which is maybe is also not as much more extreme as what we can see in reality. So every once in a while, Google gets some fire for this when someone finds an example query that is a bit controversial. So this one here is a screenshot of an article that was published in the Telegraph in 2016. If you searched back then for professional hairstyles, you would get these pictures here. So it's all women in there. Yeah, so you clearly have this, and a lot of them are Black women. So you have clearly this racial bias in here. Similarly, this one is from The Guardian. In the same year, when you type in the search query 3 Black teenagers, you used to get the pictures that you see here on the left-hand side. So these are all mugshots of criminals. If you, on comparison, search for 3 white teenagers, these are the pictures that you would get. Yeah, so you see that every once in a while the society is being made aware of there's something going on. Then an article comes out, Google tries to fix this, and still problems still exist in a certain way. So why does this exist? Well, maybe one of the reasons for this is also the filter bubble. So let's took this screenshot here as an example. If you think about 2 different news, one news could be about climate change, another news could be about excessive regulation of businesses. So both are kind of about the same thing. So the search algorithm decides now what is the most likely that you want to hear. If you're kind of in an American context, left-leaning, democratic, pro-environment, you probably get the one side of the story. If you're right-leaning, you get another side of the story. Yeah, you maybe hear more about excessive regulation of businesses and the harmful impact that it can have. And of course, good search engines try their best to diversify the results. Yeah? So that's a well-known problem. So nevertheless, what we have here, we have a lack of transparency, and there are different reasons for this. One is economic reasons. So we don't know really how these algorithms work, because Google, again, is the market leader, does not want to reveal this trade secret, right? Because it's their big advantage is that they have very good algorithms that are better than others. Another reason why we have this lack of transparency is that we have some technical limitations to, like, especially if you think about deep learning, it can get very messy and very complicated to explain how you get to a certain result. And finally, and that's what we are going to focus on in the Scikit project, is the algorithmic illiteracy. That means that people are not sometimes even aware that search engines or search results that they have might be personalized or might be biased in a certain way. Yeah, so that's the one of the big problems that we're dealing with right now in society. And this is exactly what the Scikit project is focusing on. So the Scikit project is coordinated by Jana Otterbacher from the Open University of Cyprus, and with her team, of course. She has a team of academics working on this project. Then the other work package leaders are Zika Kuflik from University of Haifa. Then we have Faust Junior from University of Trento. We have Michael Rovazzo from University of Edinburgh and myself from University of Sheffield. So we all approach this from a kind of computer science / social science perspective, you might recognize some of the names. They're focusing more on user modeling and also on AI in general. And the mission or the activities of Scikit are, first of all, that we want to promote algorithmic transparency and information access. It has a strong focus on Cyprus, since that's where the center is established. So we develop intervention tools, for example. We also conduct basic research, and we also are supporting responsible research and innovation culture. So just to give you an example of the basic research that we do here, the one thing I want to point out is that we recently completed a very detailed literature survey, and you can access this on the URL that is printed down here on the project website, where we read hundreds of papers that have been published in, for example, Rexis, CGR, Kai, and other conferences that focus on certain aspects of information bias and transparency. So if you're looking for suitable references for your work, it might be worth having a look at this database that we have set up there. But then the question, of course, is, okay, how can we actually now study what is the impact, or to what extent are search engine biased? And we are following a black box approach, which is a bit more of a social science approach or information science approach, where we treat a search engine as a black box. We put something inside and we look at what we get out of it. Here's an example. This is a project that was led by my postdoc, Monica Paramita. She's working on a project to analyze the images of COVID. If you do a Google search of COVID-19 images, so how, if we see images, or if we see the pandemic through the lens of Google, what do we see in different countries? So the experimental setup that we had here was, we wanted to create a set of realistic search queries that users might use to retrieve images related to COVID-19. Then we took these search queries and we simulated users coming from different countries using Google image search. And then we just analyzed the search results, the SERPs that we got from these very country-specific retrievals that we got from Google Images. So just to explain this pipeline a little bit more in detail, we split it into two parts. The first one was the query collection and analysis part. So in order to find realistic search queries, we relied on crowd workers. We hired 400 crowd workers to generate as example search queries, and we gave them two search tasks, as a simulated search task as defined following the suggestion by Pia Borlund, to see how we can actually to generate two realistic search tasks. One was a scenario: imagine you have to set up a photo diary to preserve images of the COVID-19 pandemic. The second task was to set up a photo diary to identify photos that can be used to document people's habits developed during COVID-19, during the pandemic. So you ran this. So they were asked to create up to 3 queries for each task. And we asked this from crowd workers living in the UK, Germany, Spain, and Italy. The next step, we were then able to actually categorize these queries. So we were able to identify these categories either belonging to a stay-at-home category, personal protection, healthcare, pandemic information, or societal impact. What we did next then was we took these queries and we sent them to Google with different region parameters and different language parameters, and then analyzed the results we got there. So we did one, we used Clarify, an image tagging system, to try to find out what the content is of these images, but we also looked at the URLs and locations to see if there are any differences. So just to give you an overview here as a teaser of this work, here, this figure here shows you the different categories of the search queries that were produced by our crowd workers. So again, we had stay-at-home, personal protection, healthcare, general pandemic queries, and societal impact from different countries. This one here is now, once we send these search results to Google image search, we were interested to see how much overlap is actually there. So if I am in Germany, do I get the same results as if I'm in the UK? And so what we found was that actually the results you see here on the right-hand side, comparison between Spain and Italy. So these search results, we had much more overlap in images than between Germany and UK, for example. That's what is the top 30 and top 100. Where was the main overlap or the least similar images? Well, if you use, so these are some of the queries that our crowd workers provided. So if you have something very specific UK-centric, like lockdown protest London, then you would get a very strong overlap of 94%. However, if you would get something a bit more general, like COVID as a search query or COVID virus, the overlap was far smaller than if you had these very specific ones. We were also interested to see what's the proportion of the results in the top 30 from different countries. So we see that if you triggered a retrieval in UK, that 42% of the results were from the UK, 1% of the images were from Germany, and nothing from Spain and Italy. Compare this to Germany, for example, we got 22% of the results in Germany were actually images on UK websites. 16 were from Germany, 1 from Spain, nothing from Italy. Yeah, so it was interesting to see this difference there as well. We also looked at the localization ratios. So for the different categories that we identified, stay at home, personal protection, healthcare, pandemic general, and society impact. And there we also were able to detect a significant difference between the different results that you would get in different countries. So this was just one example, a teaser really of the research we do. I wanted to also talk a bit about interventions that we do here. So one of the aims of this project is to educate. What that means, we developed teacher training sessions using our own tools to support educational activities in schools and also to promote endorsement of bias-aware digital literacy skills. For this, I wanted to first mention this quote here as well, which we always used as a motivation when we approach teachers. We say, like, unless there's an increased effort to make true information literacy a part of basic education, there will be a class of people who can use algorithms and a class used by algorithms. Just to emphasize that it's important to actually develop this information literacy to understand how to interpret search results. The objectives of our training is, first of all, to raise critical awareness of algorithmic biases. So we directly reach out to teachers because they will be the ones who can spread the news. And also our aim is to design intervention in the classroom. So by developing lesson plans with teachers together to raise the awareness among students. Here's just some examples, screenshots of the educational materials. Again, this is a project that started in Cyprus, so the the content is all in Greek. But we've also developed an English language bias intervention tool prototype. There's a screenshot of this one here, where the students or anyone who has access to this prototype can just try out a few search queries and see how search results might be biased, and can also filter them to identify different aspects or different facets of the search. Apart from reaching out to teachers, we also have other activities, like, for example, webinars and seminars. And just here's a screenshot of our YouTube page where you can find, you have access to a couple of different speakers. I just provided a list of a few recent speakers. So if you are interested in this, please have a look. We also organized the winter school earlier this year. We are right now finalizing a report for the SIG-IR forum, so it hopefully will come out soon with more details on what we have done there. Finally, we are also organizing a Dachstuhl seminar. So this one actually was already planned to take place last year, but because of the pandemic, it was rescheduled. So it's now scheduled to take place in June. We'll see if that actually happens now, because still in a bit unclear what we will do with this one, but nevertheless, it is one of our one of our deliverables to develop or to run this Dutch seminar. So I tried to, I actually shortened my presentation a little bit because I noticed that we're running out of time. So I've removed some bits. I wanted to finalize, mention a few names. So Jana Otterbacher and Monika Paramita, Kalia Ofano, and Efrenia Christoforo, in particular for this project I talked about, and then of course also the whole SciCat team. Finally, just some shameless advertisements. We are hiring. So if any one of you is looking for a job as a lecturer in data science, would like to continue working on information retrieval, please talk to me.
Thank you very much. I think you're the first one who started advertising stuff here. So the question I have is, let me just check. There was no question posted on the QA window. I was surprised that you didn't have any industry partners, or even if not industry, then maybe organizations outside. So are you all university partners, or do you have anybody from, let's say, NGOs, companies, standardization organizations, whatever?
For this one, we don't have companies to work with, but we work with schools in Cyprus.
Okay, okay. So the other thing I ask, I mean, I find that very interesting because I'm also involved in a project where we are trying to help address this information illiteracy somehow. The question I have is, how generalizable do you think this would be? So let's say you teach them certain things, but of course, if you have an algorithm like Google, which has maybe 300 parameters or 400 or 500 parameters, how much of it do you think will be generalizable, or it might have changed tomorrow?
Yeah, so we don't focus too much on explaining how the algorithms work, because as you said, yeah, that might change tomorrow. It's more about raising awareness that the search results might have a bias. So it's more like starting critical thinking, promoting to question the results a bit more, because the whole it's very challenging, as we have seen in this workshop as well, to actually know, first of all, what is bias, how can we define bias, do we all agree with bias, and can we even come with a generalizable approach of approaching the bias.
Okay, so and if you, let's say, if you tell them about it, that will just be another boring session like at school what they have. So do you have any way of interacting with them? Let's say having some games or some interactive things that they do with them to see whether what you tell them actually helps?
Yeah, so we have developed different activities. So one thing I mentioned already earlier was we developed a prototype which they can actually use to play around a little bit to see if they use different filters, how the results would change. But we've also developed some teaching activities surrounding how they think a search engine should look like, and how they would like to be informed about potential bias in search engines. So that's something that we have tried out here in Sheffield, but also we run experiments at the winter school that I mentioned, and at sessions in Cyprus, in Italy, and also in Cyprus. In Haifa in Israel.